So I went and saw Smile 2 this weekend, and I'm really happy to say that it was actually a really fun movie to watch. I don't necessarily think that it's better than the first one, but I'm also an asshole that thinks like the first movie of everything is pretty much better. But I'll give this movie its roses. It does things that are very new for like the Smile movies, while also kind of evolving what the monster can do and what the meaning of the monster is. It doesn't necessarily do a whole lot of new things. It still tries to use a lot of tropes that the first movie used, such as just a scene that comes to mind from the first movie, when she's talking to her psychiatrist at her house, or her counselor, whatever it was, and it turns out the counselor wasn't even really there because the real counselor called her on the phone while she was talking to the counselor sitting down in front of her. And they try to use that trope a little bit in the second movie. I don't think it's as successful. If you've seen the first one, you'd probably just be like, oh, it was way better done in the first movie. But there were things about the first movie that just were so fresh and so new at the time that I think that that's why it's overshadowing the second movie a little bit. I also just really like the story of the first one more. I like the character and just like the implications of like a wellness therapist, like somebody who's like an actual like deep psychiatric therapist becoming kind of just brain fucked by trauma and brain fucked by just like this thing that feeds off of the trauma and just like the guilt and stuff like that that people have. I just like the I like the inception, the dream inside a dream type bullshit when it comes to it's eating grief off of a therapist. It's kind of ironic in a way. In the second movie, it follows a pop star. She's kind of like a Beyonce or like a Rihanna. She, a lot of like just like poppy type music, dance and shit like that on stage. She's very popular. So it's a very interesting dynamic with like the main character being like this like super well known pop star that's in the public image all the time. So it has a lot more implications when it comes to, oh, the monster or the demon that's feeding off of her guilt is playing with her in a way because there's so many different fans and there's so many different like PR people and just things that she has to do on a given day where she's around so many people. In the first movie, the therapist could kind of lock herself away and kind of just say, you know what, I'm not going to hurt anybody. I'm just going to stay in my house by myself. When it comes to this pop star chick, she's young and she really wants to like get her career on a resurgence almost. Just because a year prior she had like a drug problem and got into a really bad car wreck and all this shit happened to her, and that's where a lot of the trauma comes from that the monster feeds off of. But I genuinely really liked just the implications of her being like this pop star that's almost obsessed with her own public image, making sure that she's always in the right light when it comes to, you know, public relations and like being always at like these like events and everything like that. Like it was really fun to see how the monster, the smile demon, I call it, it kind of manipulates her and plays with her. There's a scene in the movie actually, and this was in the trailer, I'm pretty sure, but she's doing like a pretty much like where she signs things and takes pictures with fans and everything. It's like a meet and greet kind of thing. And there's a point where like there's a couple of like fans that she has this like interaction with where she signs something and then she like hugs them and gives them like a picture or whatever, where they're just smiling at her the whole time. They're not responding to her, they're just smiling, and everybody around her is kind of just like, person's fucking weird. But she is like so paranoid about the smile monster like fucking with her that she's not sure if it's like actually the monster or if it's just a crazed fan, like a fan that's so crazy gullible for her. And that kind of shit really puts the audience, in my opinion, myself, it put me on edge quite a bit because I don't know what it's like to be famous, obviously, but I'm sure being in the limelight all the time is really a lot of pressure and it causes a lot of like your past like fuck ups, like drug addiction and stuff like that. I'm sure it comes up, and I really like that this movie used like the famous route instead of just doing another like therapist or another just random human being like on the streets being a smile, victim. I like that it was a pop star. I like that it was evolved in that way. With that being said, I thought the scares in this movie were a little less awesome, a little less on edge than the first one. The first movie, and I always say this when it comes to horror movies, but horror is super subjective. Like you might not be scared of things that I'm scared of. I might be scared of things that you are. I can't stand jump scares, but if they're good jump scares with a good story behind them, I'll watch the movie, no problem. That's how Smile 1 was for me, where there was a lot of jump scares, but they were really well placed. Like they were really like good jump scares where it's like, "Whoa, I thought it was going to happen right here and it ended here." And it's like subject it's like just the way that it works is just very like well put together. Like it's really smart timing a lot of times. It really fucks with your head as an audience member. And the second one does that as well, but I will admit like I didn't have moments in the second movie where I was like covering my eyes like this, scared. I sat 3 rows in front of the theater screen, and I feel like normally when I'm that close to a screen, I'm like, "Oh, oh my god." But like I didn't really have those moments as much. There were definitely moments where I was kind of like, "Oh shit, what's this all about?" Like, similar to what I said about like the meet and greet part. I was kind of like, "Whoa, wait a second, like this is kind of creeping me out." But there was never a moment where I felt like, "Oh no, I can't look at the screen. I'm too scared of a jump scare." There was like one moment, now that I think about it, where it's like she's watching a video of the last victim, like of his recording while he's looking around his apartment in the dark. That creeped me out a little bit because POV shots just kind of creep me out for some reason. But other than that, I didn't have a lot of moments like that. And I think that's kind of a downfall with this movie is like it doesn't do anything necessarily like new like the first one did in a lot of ways. And I'm not saying the first one like was revolutionary in any way, but it was good. It was reviewed really well. And personally, I went into the first movie assuming this is just gonna be another shitty jump scare movie. And I came out of Smile One with a lot more like the message was really good. It really dove into like how grief can fuck with you really bad and how it can change your perspective on how people look at you. And I like that a lot. Like that movie like really like hit home with me in a lot of ways, especially because the main character of the first movie went through the trauma of like watching her mom pass away and like just kind of just watching people kill themselves, and I hate saying that. I know it might be a trigger thing for people, but that's what it's about. The monster eats off of grief, and it is transferred between one person to another from somebody seeing another person die pretty much or be killed. And that's pretty much what it's all about. And they double down on that in this movie. It's the same premise. Everything's the same pretty much. It's just a different character it follows. Now, you don't necessarily have to watch the first movie to enjoy the second movie, but this movie does start from right where the first movie ends. So if you've seen the first movie, like it kind of like leaves off on like a little bit of a cliffhanger in a way, setting up for like a sequel. Even though it didn't really need to have a sequel, it is going to make money though, and it has to be a franchise. So clearly there's going to be more Smile movies. But the first movie by itself ends on a really good note where it's like, well, they could make another one, they might not. You know what I mean? Like either way, it was good. This one continues right where that one left off, and I think they did a really good job. I think from the first to the second one, I think they did a really good job. Like I said, it's practically the same type of movie, same shit going on. Just in my opinion, the first movie is a little bit better when it comes to the just the natural progression of it. The story of it just felt more natural to me, and I could relate to it a little bit more. But the second movie, that's not saying it's not a good movie. I still am going to give this movie a good score. I still think this is like an 8 or an 8.5. It was really good. It was fun. I think you should see this movie in theaters because the theater experience of this one is like kind of crazy. The atmosphere of the movie is still, like I said, the same as the first one. I'll keep saying that because it is very similar to the first one. Not as good in my opinion, but it is very similar to the first one with its tone. And I think the directing and the writing really help that a lot. There's one character I'd say in the second movie that I thought was just really, really poorly acted, and that was the main character's like ex best friend that comes back into the picture a little bit. I don't remember what her name was. I think her name was like Gemma. She was a bad actor. I every time she was ever like I could hear her talking or she was on screen, to talk kind of like this, and like it was just I don't know. She just didn't have it for me, in my opinion. But other than that, Naomi Scott, I believe that's her name, Naomi Scott. She played a very good main character. Like she was a really good character portraying like a pop star. Like she did a really good job. She felt like a really good scream queen where she was just like always paranoid. And she was always screaming, and she was good though. I really enjoyed that. Um, there's a part in the movie where she's on stage and she's doing like a charity event, and she's reading off a teleprompter. It was specifically told that she'd be reading off a teleprompter because she was going through a lot of mental shit after the smile monster infects her or whatever. She kind of is unraveling a little bit. The audience is starting to get more of her past a little bit as the movie progresses, similar to how the first movie did. Again, similar to the first movie. And as it progresses, you're starting to see why she's so on edge about this smile monster, why she's like, it's feeding off of these things. It's also like picking at her too. She's on stage though, reading off a teleprompter. And as she's reading it, so she's in a bad headspace as it is, but she's doing the charity event because she's kind of being pressured into it. And, she's a fucking public figure. She needs to do like, charity events and stuff like that. She's reading a teleprompter though, and the teleprompter kind of like stops on her, and she's like trying to like improv and make something up to like make it sound natural. But like clearly the monster is fucking with her head, and everybody in the audience is like, "What's wrong with this chick? Like, what the fuck's going on?" And slowly, like you start noticing that the audience, somebody stands up in the audience and is smiling at her and is walking up to her, and she just naturally, like Naomi Scott as an actor, like did so well in that scene where she's like kind of freaking the fuck out, screaming at the person to leave her alone and everything. And it's all kind of fucked up in her head, you know what I mean? It's more amplified because it's in her head because the monster's fucking with her. But the way like her scream and her just dialogue right there was really really like catchy. Like it was really good. It really caught me. And I was like, oh shit, this is kind of freaky, man. There are good freaky scenes in this movie where you're like, damn, that's fucked up. But I didn't think that it was as naturally scary as the first one was. And I think it's just the story as a whole didn't like, I don't really relate to a celebrity as much as I do like a therapist that has grief from her mom passing away. Not saying like the main character of this one, the second one's like grief wasn't like relatable, but it was more of like a celebrity type grief where like she kind of, did drugs and she fucked up her own career and fucked up other people's careers. And it was just not as relatable to me. And I think that's what really separates this one from the first one is how relatable it is when it comes to the main character. Both are good though. I think both movies are really good. I still to this day though think that Smile One is like a 9 to a 9.5. I think it was just a really good scary movie that like I'll always remember the way it ended. I'll always remember just how much I liked the idea of it and the concept. It was similar to me to It Follows. I thought It Follows was a way more like I think It Follows was a little better because it's more of like an indie type of horror movie, and I like those more. But Smile had the same tone as It Follows, where it's like something is like following her around and it's like kind of freaky because you're feeling like you're her in a lot of ways. And again, it's relatable. The second movie, another scene that I really liked that I wish they would have done more scenes like this because the atmosphere in this movie is really good. Like the sound is really good. There's moments where there's no sound at all, and that's where the jump scares will get you really quick. And those work. Those work really well, especially on me. But there's a scene where she's in her apartment and her lights are like going out in and out, and it's kind of fucked up. It's freaky. She's freaking the fuck out. She's by herself. She's kind of on some pain meds because her back is fucked up from like a previous accident she had. And she is kind of just like hearing things happening in her apartment and the sound going from right to left, and it's really good in the theater. The environment is very good. That's what I was saying. You should see this in the theater because the sound is super amplified and super just atmospheric. It's really good. But she's walking through her apartment and she starts seeing these articles of clothing all over her apartment. She's like, who the fuck? Somebody's in my apartment. And there's just a guy at the end of the hallway, darkness. And you can just see his outline standing there staring at her. And she's like, fuck. And then as soon as she like kind of like backs up a little bit, he starts just running at her. And me personally, when somebody's like running at somebody and it's in a closed environment, it's like when you're a kid. And like I even do this to this day where I go down to the basement to like fold laundry and then it's like nighttime and I'll flip the light switch and I'll run up the stairs as fast as I can because I feel like something's chasing me. That part, she's running away, going to the front door, and you can hear the guy stomping, like chasing her, but it's focused on her while she's running away. They unfortunately only do that like one time in the movie. And if they would have done something like that more often, there would have been more moments where I'm jolting out of my seat because that moment I was like, oh no, 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 no. And like that's what a scary movie is meant to be in theaters. It's meant to everybody's just on edge together. We all feed off of each other in the theater. And that happened quite a bit, but those scenes didn't happen enough for me personally. And I think if they had more of those scenes, it would have been way better. Another thing that I liked about the movie, the cinematography was really good. I forget who the director is, but he's definitely progressed as a filmmaker from the first movie. It's very just like the way like scenes will transition. Sometimes scenes are upside down and it's almost like trying to fuck with the audience a little bit, like trying to show you that like the smile monster is here and it's fucking with her a little bit. It's just it increases the atmosphere a little bit when the camera pans and spins upside down sometimes slowly with the creepy eerie music in the background. They did a really good job, like a really good job with cinematography and the sound in this movie. I thought it was really good. The only things I didn't really love about this movie, I didn't relate to the character as much, unfortunately. Though she was good, she was a good actor, and the premise was decent enough to where it's like, okay, that's a good sequel option. I didn't really love the supporting cast as much as I kind of did in the first movie. Though there wasn't as much of a supporting cast in the first movie, I still liked the people a little bit more. Again, the first one, it's subjective. It was just more relatable to me. And I think horror is the best when it's relatable in a way. Um, Other than that, though, this movie's ending was kind of a surprise to me as well. It's very mind bendery towards the latter half of the movie. Like, there's a lot, once things start unfolding, you think you have the answers to things, but there is no actual answer, it feels like sometimes. And that might confuse people, that might like make people mad. I like the way it ended though. It ends in like a very like broad way where it's like, okay, there's going to definitely be more sequels. I can see how they can do that, but my only problem with it was that it felt like it was kind of just paced weirdly at the end. I liked the pacing. It was just like it was all such a mind bender that you have to kind of go out of your way to like remember like, wait, didn't this happen? And wait, how does that happen if this happens? And it all makes sense. It just kind of, without spoiling it, it's kind of hard to understand at times. Though at the same time, there were moments when I look over at my friend and I'm like, oh, I don't think that person's real, or I don't think this person's really there. And there were a lot of moments where I was right about that. So it is predictable in some ways, but it still grips you in a way where you're like interested enough to keep going and watching it. But I like this movie. I didn't think there was a lot wrong with it at all. Like I said, I'm going to give it like an 8.5. The first one was just a little bit better because it's more relatable to me. And it was the first one that did everything just naturally better. But the second one was definitely a worthy sequel. There's definitely going to be more. And honestly, I'm totally down with more of these movies. I think these are really good horror movies. I think they're going to bring in a lot of audiences no matter how many they do. I can see them, down the road potentially getting a little stupid, having so many of these movies. But what's nice about these movies is that they don't really give you an answer in the end. So like you're kind of holding on for the next movie to give you more answers about the monster or the demon, whatever it is. And I'm not sure when the next one's going to come out. I'm assuming this one did pretty well. So my theater was packed. So if there is another one, I hope we get more answers into everything. But as of right now, it's pretty much just the same formula over and over again, and it's honestly working. So if this movie just kind of capitalized on more of those like just quiet moments where it's like the atmosphere fucks with you a little bit, I think it would have been even better than the first one. But again, that's just my opinion. But that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about. So have a good one, guys. Bye.